Good morning, Alan.
Good morning. It's actually afternoon, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're thrilled that you could be with us. Tom and Jeff are also going to join me today asking you some questions. And perhaps Tom can start off asking if that's okay.
Well, I think you mentioned that Jeff and I joined today. It's only because we weren't going to miss out on the opportunity to talk to Alan. Your bio is obviously incredible, and when I'm 86, if I look as good as you and have a story as good as you, I'll be reasonably happy. But what I can also add to that bio is and credit you with really being the inspiration for Packhorse and our mission on being the greatest land custodian that we can be is based on the motivation that you've given us in the holistic management. So you've started what we believe to be an incredible mission that we're going to do and do our part in trying to repair as much of the soil and environment as we can. But it'd be interesting, we talk about the TED Talk and there's 8 million viewers, and I'd be shocked if a lot of people that are watching this webinar haven't seen it. But to sort of give the background, can you give us a bit of the story on, what's made you realise to dedicate your life to holistic management and trying to get people on the page to follow holistic management of land and environment?
Well, yes, I began very early, as you said there. And when I was 21, I was in charge of a very large area of Zambia, what Northern Rhodesia it then was. And I had Sir Frank Fraser-Darling stay with me for 6 weeks. And I was showing him all the biodiversity loss and degradation in these future national parks that we were creating. And he had no solutions to all the damage I was showing him. And we couldn't blame anything we knew. And that was a great awakening to me that I was working with one of the world's top recognized ecologists, and he had no more idea than me. But the buck stopped with me. I was the man in charge. He was just reporting. And so that made me very determined, and I changed my career from studying elephants, which I loved, to really trying to study our own professional management. What were we doing in management that was leading to such degradation in future national parks? And then I became even more determined one day when I was sitting by a flooded river coming down in mud and dead donkeys and goats and trees floating by, and grown men don't cry, but I just sat on the bank and cried my heart out, because that was my country going, and there's nothing more important in the world than saving human habitat. You're talking about saving humanity. And knowing there were no solutions to that in any country, and what a big problem it was, I became very determined that day. I just was also an officer in the army at the time, and we were fighting a war, and I hadn't yet gone into politics. And I just thought, what the hell am I doing? Serving in the war, fighting, seeing guys dying, risking my life. What am I prepared to do about this bigger damage? Because I'm fighting that war for politicians I don't believe in, policies I don't believe in. What am I prepared to do about the most serious thing, which is the destruction of our own country? And that moment, it sounds dramatic, but I literally was decided I will give my life if I have to. Nothing is going to stop me. I am going to find a solution to this problem. And it is a problem of over 10,000 years. More than 20 civilizations have already failed because of desertification and biodiversity loss, habitat destruction, and now it's threatening the whole world. It's called climate change now.
Yeah, that's really good. It's a good segue, I guess, because it's obviously taken you quite a few years to sort of form the holistic sort of management principles. And just wondering if you'd be able to, for our audience, just sort of simply explain, the holistic management principles, and then, why are they so important to our society and to the economy to mitigate those effects of climate change?
Holistic management, like pregnancy, is 100% practical. Okay, and so I don't work on any principles with it. We just manage holistically, and we've learned how to do that now, and that the way that all humans are managing is causing climate change. And we've learned over these many years, and I say we, because it wasn't done by me alone. I was the determined person driving it, but I literally worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of ranchers, pastoralists, fellow scientists, individuals, all seeing the deterioration of their land, early ranchers, game ranchers, etc. And between us all, by 1983, we had finally broken through. And at that point, in fact, I quoted in my textbook, American scientists, World Bank scientists, and others working with me that I was commissioned to train actually made a statement. They said, we now recognize that unsound resource management is universal in the United States. Well, frankly, it's universal in Australia too. Yeah. I doubt you've got a single resource management policy that is sound. And so the work you guys are doing of wanting to be stewards of the environment is incredible work. You can't put a value on that.
The journey started. We've got a little way to go. I'd like to just touch on, we talk about the landscape and how we manage that. I'd like to touch on the importance of animals in that perspective and how important are they in helping us make change?
They're not important, they're vital. It's more than importance. If we had an ecologically literate society, the world today would be investing trillions of dollars, not billions, trillions of dollars in better management of cattle and other livestock, because there's no technology even imaginable in the world that can stop climate change. Technology can stop coal and oil and fossil fuels putting carbon into the atmosphere, but technology cannot stop agriculture destroying the land as we are, and national parks declining as they are, and so on. That's a biological problem. And that's part of what we learned by 1983, that was that, we're all tool-using animals. It's what drives us, but humans have only always had fire and technology, two tools. And with those, you cannot solve this biological problem. So technology can stop the carbon going into the atmosphere, but on the ground, to get the carbon into the soil, that's a biological problem. Technology will never solve that one. And cattle are absolutely essential. They're not optional. They're essential because the biodiversity loss, desertification, mega fires, and climate change are feeding on each other and spiraling out of control. That's why it's getting more and more rapid. Right now, you can only break that cycle at the desertification level. You can't break it. If they stop all carbon going into the atmosphere tomorrow, it's not going to stop climate change because of the desertification of Australia and 2/3 of the world. Now, the areas that are desertifying are because the rainfall there is seasonal. So the rainfall, say, in London and Johannesburg is about the same. But no matter what you do, you could overgraze every plant, you could plow, you could use chemicals, you could use anything you like around London, and it's not possible to create thousands of hectares of bare ground. It would just cover up, nature would cover it up. Now, Johannesburg, most of Australia, you have seasonal rainfall. So you get months of dry. And in those, the grass that covers the ground and gives us most of the ground cover and soil development, trees don't give us that as much as grass. Now that grass cannot graze itself. And so, as you know and observe in Australia, when your grass grows green, that's fine. But when the dry period comes and the grass dries, no grass can shed its own leaf like a tree can. And so the grass in sunlight oxidizes. That's a chemical breakdown. And if you don't have enough animals on the land with the moisture in their gut to biologically cycle that grass, and it continues to chemically break down, it's such a gradual process that it kills the grass and you start getting bare ground, losing litter, and that's desertification or climate change in the end.
It's interesting you talk about how animals or cattle in particular, or livestock, is essential. Yet, and in most of the world at the moment, cattle are seen as the problem to climate change. And what's your response to that when you hear people talk about that?
Well, we're facing a situation, frankly, exactly like we did in the time of Copernicus and Galileo, when the whole world experts knew the world was flat and we were the center of the universe. When Copernicus and Galileo and those early people pointed to the evidence that we were not at the center of the universe and that our planet was round, that was heresy, and they were ridiculed for centuries. Now, that's the same thing I've faced. You see, when I discovered that we had no option but to use cattle, I used to hate cattle. I was on public record that I was prepared to shoot ranchers because I was so passionate about stopping the degradation of the land. That's why I developed game ranching, to replace cattle. And when I realized I was wrong, and I had to swallow my pride and swallow my bloody ego and go around the country and say, damn it, we need your cattle. All right. When realizing that was heresy, because the world's experts know it's wrong. So you go to a really reputable organization like National Geographic Society, and just last week I was reading one of their publications, and they say that cattle emit methane and cause climate change. Now, normally those are reputable people, and they still are, because that's the human belief that's taught in almost every university, government agency, IUCN, World Wildlife Fund. And so the world knows that it's wrong. So they don't see it as a new discovery. And that's why there's been so much controversy around my life and what I've been doing in trying to develop a way to use cattle as a tool to reverse desertification and thus address climate change.
I've heard you talk before where cattle are a resource, and you've pointed to the management. It's been our management of that resource in the past that is the problem, and we need to own up to that and say, well, we have been part of the problem. What can you expand on that?
Yes, and now, I've been a lone voice saying management is the problem for half a century. And now almost every scientist in the world is acknowledging that humans are causing climate change. Now, science is logical. And if humans are causing climate change, then it means cattle are not, and coal and oil are not causing it. Because coal, oil, and cattle are resources. Soil is a resource, water is a resource, wind is a resource. And nobody would dream of saying soil, water, and wind are causing climate change and desertification. Then why are we saying cattle, coal, and oil are? They're just resources. It's how you manage them that causes the problem. So now we've unwittingly, scientists don't realize what they've acknowledged, but science is logical, and the acknowledgement that humans are causing climate change is now a scientific acknowledgement that the cause of climate change is management. And so that's what you guys will have to focus on, is management. Your cattle are innocent. Management is not.
what's the key essential bit about biodiversity? Because I know that I've heard you talk before about where they've locked up country, like national parks, and they're losing biodiversity because of it. Can you, I know we're probably on a bit of a segue, but I'd love to hear you talk about that.
If I'm understanding you correctly, you're asking me why are national parks losing biodiversity?
Correct.
Not all national parks are. As I said, London and Johannesburg, same rainfall, but different environments. National parks in marine environments, lakes, wetlands, tropical forests, etc. If you rest them, there's no oxidation because there's such humidity throughout the year that in these humid environments, the cycle of life, birth, growth, decay, is a cycle of life. Decay is as vital as birth is. If nothing decayed, you wouldn't get anything born either. So it's a cycle that goes on. And in humid environments, you can't break that cycle. With technology, anything, it's very difficult to break the cycle. Now, when you get to environments like most of Australia's land, if you break that cycle, desertification will occur. And where we broke it, as I described to you earlier, was at the decay point. So that's where it breaks. Now, in national parks around me, there are more than 30 national parks around my home in Africa, in Zambia, Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. Now, these are some of our most shocking examples of bare ground, trees hundreds of years old now falling into the river and so on. And we cannot blame coal, oil, gas, corruption, poaching, cattle. There's nothing to blame except management. And that management is supported by all the universities in the world virtually, World Wildlife Fund, IUCN, National Geographic, everybody. But that management is what's causing that biodiversity loss. Now, they're blaming elephants instead of cattle at the moment. Well, I mentioned in the TED Talk, I made that mistake too, over 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when I interpreted, like all scientists, that if land was being damaged, there must be too many animals. As there weren't cattle, but there were lots of elephants, it was very easy for me to prove that the elephants were causing the damage, because that's what we scientists do. We prove what we believe. We find it very difficult to believe when data doesn't fit our beliefs. Then we find that extremely difficult. And that's the mistake I made. We shot 40,000 elephants, the government did, based initially on my research, and I was wrong. And so it's not excessive animal numbers. And for centuries, that's been a belief even amongst ranchers, that, and scientists and everyone, that if land is deteriorating and there are animals on it, there are too many animals. That's why all your universities in Australia teach about correct stocking rates and graze half, leave half, judge the stocking rates, etc. So when we discovered that animals and cattle were essential, we did the testing on Liebig's ranch with 60,000 Brahman cattle. And what we did was we took the worst land in the whole country that we could find, and we trebled the stocking rate. We went to ridiculous levels to see if that was the problem, and it wasn't. We just grew solid grassland. And we produced 5 times as much meat per acre, and the total thing cost us $1.80 an acre. That's all it cost us. And we just did that by massive increase of livestock. That's the holistic planned grazing process. We've never had a single failure that I'm aware of in 50 years.
When you sort of stumbled onto that, did you have the epiphany of it's just mimicking nature?
You know, the whole basis of science, and I've seen this definition many times in my life. The definition of science is our studying nature, trying to understand nature. And that's all I was trying to do as an ecologist.
Yeah.
Now, it so happens that increasingly around the world, and I wasn't the first to say it at all, people are saying we need to mimic nature. And yes, that's correct. And when we had our earlier discussion, I said to you, yes, and so that's why in the more advanced training I'm doing with Savory Institute people now, I posed that question to them the last time we were together of saying, now that we know management is the problem and humans only manage humans, economy, and through that nature, and we know that we need to mimic nature, almost everybody accepts that high biodiversity or complexity in nature and diversity leads to production and stability. I think even the most hidebound economists recognize that a mono economy is not healthy, that the more diverse an economy is, the healthier it is. And then when you get to humans who are managing economy and nature, we find diversity of opinion leads to chaos and stagnation and conflict. So we've got a difference there. Now, we've solved that problem too by managing holistically, because when we manage holistically, instead of having a lot of diverse opinions, as you do all over Australia, whether people should run cattle, not run cattle, use fire, not use fire, I watch these controversies going on all the time. All of that dies when people manage holistically. And the reason it dies is because people stop making decisions to meet their needs, their desires, and address problems, which is how every human makes every conscious decision. We stop doing that. That remains the reason for our decisions. But instead of reducing the complexity of society, economy, and nature to needs, desires, and problems, we first develop a holistic context. How does every Australian want his or her life to be? And you'll find it's identical. Now, once we've got total agreement, now we want diversity of opinion, because how are we going to do that? Now we start talking about how to do it. And when we're managing holistically, we have a series of about 7 filters to check that our actions are in line with what we all want, our holistic context. So now we find we can mimic nature economically, environmentally, and in the human part of the management. And one thing I would correct, Tom, in what I think you said earlier, you said when you manage, you start with the environment. No, you start with the people. As you go ahead and manage, if you start with the environment, you're going to fail. You have to start with the people, because you've got to finance your organization. And the people have to do that. And the people have to decide how to manage nature. So you start with the people and the finance, and then you manage the cattle and the nature.
Yeah, it seems pretty logical, doesn't it? So,
Sounds simple.
Sounds simple. So, Alan, I guess you touched on it before, and I think one of the big challenges we have is around the political scaffolding of how those decisions are made for environmental policy. Could you just share some of your thoughts on that for us? And what do you think the blockers are here in making real progress?
Yeah, that's very easy to explain, because we've had a lot of time studying this. For me, it's over 65 years trying to understand it. And we've acknowledged, and all scientists acknowledge, management is the problem. Now, you manage at 2 levels. You manage at what I call the human level. That's individual families managing their family, their own little economy, their own little shop, their business, their farm, whatever it is. So that's the human level of management, and it needs to be holistic. It cannot be, because they don't control the economy. The government does. And the global finance is driving environmental destruction. So at the human level, people can only do the best they can while our ship sinks. Now, at larger scale, we manage through organizations. So way I like to express it to people is, I cannot even make a pen like this. I can't make a toothbrush. Almost nobody can today. Everything at scale we make through a company, an organization. So when we manage at scale, that's through government policy mostly. And government policies lead to regulations, laws, taxation, influence on extension and research and all of these things. So in Australia, you're the same as I'm dealing with in every country in the world. You can do the best you can at the farm ranch level, but government will not change policy and manage holistically for at least another 100 to 200 years. Okay, so I don't think humans have got that much time with climate change, desertification, megafires getting out of control. So you're going to have to spend some of your effort on getting government to start developing policy holistically quicker than that. And that will be very easy to do if you just get a small group of Australians who are determined to just talk to your Prime Minister and just suggest he carries on absolutely as normal, doesn't take any risk, but just lets a group of Australians develop an agricultural and environmental policy holistically and just let him see what it looks like. The chances are 99% the whole nation would go for it. It just needs a statesman at the top to initiate it and convene it.
What about people when they talk about the methane from cattle being one of the, it's a potent greenhouse gas, and that's not caused by management? What do you say to them?
Well, the methane, all right, is coming from the breakdown of vegetation in the cow. All right, now you've got termites in Australia. If your cows and your kangaroos and some animals like that don't break down the vegetation and termites do, what do you think you get? You get methane. I mean, it's just ridiculous to be blaming the methane and the cows for methane. Don't forget that on all the main continents, including Australia, South America, North America, anywhere from 80% to higher of the genera of animals were killed off by early humans. So we had many more. That's the genera. We had many more species. Australia alone, I don't know your exact figure in my mind. I think South America, it's 86%. Australia, you're very high. You have the figures there of the number of genera that were killed off in Australia. What do you think those all did? They produced methane. But you didn't have a desertifying Australia and man-made climate change. This methane thing is a waste of time. The big arguments that you've got, how much methane put out by cattle, whether or not grasslands can absorb carbon or not. People are arguing about this, whether to be vegans or not. These three things people are arguing about like anything. And so with many public talks, I've said, all right, let me just assume something that we know to be incorrect. Let's assume every human becomes vegan and we never eat beef again. Let's assume the grasslands of the world can absorb no carbon at all. And let's assume that cattle put out 10 times the methane that they do. All right, now those are untrue, but assume they're true for a moment. Now, what are you going to do about desertification, megafires, and climate change? It's impossible to address that without millions more cattle. So if we didn't have an ecologically illiterate world today, just acting on beliefs, not science, like we once did when the world was flat, as I said earlier, governments would not be investing trillions of dollars in space travel and billionaires doing so. We'd be investing that in better management, mostly of cattle and agriculture and energy.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Like without agriculture, we don't have a society.
It's
without it's the key thing, and that's the thing that can help us actually repair the environment at the same time.
Any day, you should get discussion like this going in Australia, because I watch what's happening there. I've been there several times. We've worked with many people there. We've got Savory Institute's got a number of people there, but really, I think you guys are dead as dodos. Why the hell aren't you getting off your asses and doing something?
We're trying, sir. We're trying.
We're saddled up.
We need more help.
Remember, that people talking like you are, we represent maybe 5% of the population. You've got billions of people who believe in chemical agriculture based on chemistry and technology. And you're talking about agriculture based on the biological sciences and at the human level. So, that's why I say to you, no matter how well you do, and even if you do unbelievably well, and if you represent 20% of the population 100 years from now, it's going to be too late, I fear. I'm more worried about the future now at my age than I ever was when I was younger. Somehow there seemed to be lots of time. Now, when I go into a shop and they sell me some batteries with a 5-year guarantee, I say, thank you, that's a lifetime guarantee to me. So I'm very worried about the future, more than the young people, because you get young people like Greta Thunberg, who's just copying the adults. She's just calling for more and more of the same.
So, Allan, what happens if we don't fix desertification?
What we're calling biodiversity loss, desertification, and megafires climate change, all right? It has already destroyed more than 20 civilizations in every region of the world. We don't know how to maintain city-based civilization. And that was just agriculture before we had coal and oil. Farmers and ranchers and pastoralists, through their management, have destroyed more civilizations than armies have done. Armies change civilizations. Farmers destroy them. Now it's global. And even if we hadn't got coal and oil, agriculture is going to do the job. That's why it's so essential that somewhere we get one country, one statesman leader to develop policy holistically, just so that we can see what could be. I think it'll start a domino effect, because I know that there's not a single world leader that knows what to do. And we're going to have another COP, conference of parties, as they call it, on climate change. It'll be number 27. But I gave a talk at the 26th one, and I said, I don't care if you go on to COP 100. You'll still just be arguing and fighting over ways of producing energy, producing beef, producing wine. That's all they're arguing about. None of them is talking about management.
Do you get frustrated by the lack of take-up and progress that the world is making?
We've made remarkable progress. What the Savory Institute network around the world is doing, I'm in awe of it. I'm out of it. Younger people are running it. They're incredibly efficient and dedicated, and just astounding what they're doing. They've got an EOV, ecological outcome verification program, a land to market program, so there's no greenwashing, so that people operating on the ground and supply chain can be sound all the way through. They've got some big fashion brands and so on now jumping on this bandwagon, but it's still, until policy changes, please believe me, if you study the social science and history, it'll still be another 100 years, unless some statesman in one country does what I'm suggesting and just lets a group of people in that country, say Australia, develop a policy holistically. We'll provide the facilitation skill that's all that's missing. You've got so many experts in Australia, so many people that are extremely, far more knowledgeable than I am about climate change, about carbon, about fire, about cattle. You've got thousands of people, way more knowledgeable than I am. What you're lacking in Australia, I don't think you've got a single person who knows how to facilitate the management of institutions, economy, and nature together in policy. I don't think you've got a single person. That's what you're lacking. So, but
It's
we
certainly
can
the
provide
challenge.
that for you.
It's certainly the challenge that we have, Alan. I think when we started on this journey, obviously it's a business we're trying to create, but it's got real purpose about trying to, in our own small way, influence industry to start managing holistically and taking what we all need to do as human beings, which is repair what we've previously, through our management, have degraded. And it's certainly a challenge that we have. So any help you can give us will be good.
You donated some land in Zimbabwe so Africans could learn how to practice holistic management. How's that going?
If you came there tomorrow and looked at it with me, you would find that in our deeper soils, we've made amazing progress. I mean, it's just dense grass. On our shallower soils, it's been much slower, but everywhere it is getting better. And we've done that through 20 bad seasons in a row. We haven't had a good rainfall for 20 years.
The other thing that I think that we've discovered, and certainly what we're prosecuting, is by doing the holistic management, by putting the environment first, and is that you actually then create better returns anyway. You as managing a financial situation, put the environment first, we actually get a stronger and better return and more sustainable.
If you read my textbook, I cite a study by Ohio State University researchers who studied early adopters of what I was saying across America, and they averaged 300% more profit. So you can do better on the individual farm, but overall, you're still part of that whole society.
Thank you so much for your time. It has been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, and I wish you luck, and we'll give you all the help we can.
Thank you so much. And for anyone who hasn't seen Allan Savory's TED Talk, please go and have a look at it. It is inspiring, and we'd like to see that around 80 million views rather than 8. It's a wonderful talk and educational, and it's based, we're basing our business upon your principles. So thank you so much for your time. We look forward to talking to you again soon. Hopefully we'll get you down here to talk to Anthony Albanese, who's our Prime Minister, and so we can do something about that.
You do that. and we'll really get things moving.
Great.